If you'd told me last Christmas Eve that I'd end up locked in the gym with the hottest guy I'd ever seen, well, I'd probably have laughed in your face. But there I was, standing in the middle of an almost empty gym, Christmas lights blinking dimly overhead, with exactly one other person, the guy who, by some cosmic joke, was now stuck with me until the staff showed up. And honestly, it was kind of perfect. So let me set the scene. It's December 24th, around 7 p.m., and I'm the only idiot who didn't think about taking the night off, or, sitting in front of a fire with some eggnog. I wanted to burn off the stress of a terrible year, and the gym was basically a ghost town. Everyone else had wisely decided that Christmas Eve was for mashed potatoes, not dumbbell curls. The place was quiet except for the soft hum of the treadmills, and the occasional clink of a weight being set down. It felt like I had the whole place to myself, which is exactly what I wanted, until he showed up. He wasn't part of my usual crowd, and honestly, I don't even know how I hadn't noticed him before. He was the kind of guy who looks like he just stepped out of some indie movie. Messy dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that somehow managed to be both intense and kind at the same time. He had this effortless vibe, like he didn't really care about the gym but was still absolutely killing it on the ellipticals. I caught myself watching him without even realizing it, which is rare for me because normally I'm too focused on my own routine to notice anyone else. At first, we just gave each other those polite nods, the kind you do in a shared quiet space. But then, as if on cue, the power went out. Total blackout. No emergency lights. Nothing. The gym went completely dark, and the faint glow from the Christmas lights overhead was barely enough to see by. Great, right? Two dudes stuck in a dark gym on Christmas Eve, no phones allowed inside, because the gym's policy is no distractions. Perfect disaster. He laughed, quiet, kind of nervous, but genuine, and I realized I hadn't heard his voice until that moment. It was deeper than I expected, smooth but with this little edge, like maybe he was trying not to laugh too hard at me. He reached out and flicked his phone's flashlight on, and suddenly the whole space felt a little less creepy and a lot more intimate. We stood there for a moment, just holding our phones up, trying to figure out what to do next. I was pretty sure neither of us knew where the emergency exit was, and the thought of wandering around a dark gym by myself wasn't exactly appealing. So I said the dumbest thing I could think of, "Well, I guess we're Christmas gym buddies now?" He smiled, that easy, genuine kind of smile that makes you want to stick around. "Yeah, I guess we are." And just like that, the weirdest Christmas Eve of my life was getting started. We shuffled toward the benches along the back wall, our phones casting shaky circles of light on the rubber flooring. The silence was weird, not just the gym's usual hum missing, but this sort of expectant quiet, like the whole place was holding its breath with us. There was something about being in a space that's normally so loud and busy, now empty and dark, except for two guys with phone flashlights, that made everything feel a little outside time. I glanced over at him. I'm Mike, by the way. He smiled again, but it wasn't the same smile. This one had a little hesitation in it, like he wasn't used to just introducing himself to random gym dudes on Christmas Eve. "Elliot." "Nice to meet you, Elliot." I held out my hand and he shook it firmly. "So what made you decide to show up tonight?" he asked, voice low but friendly. Honestly, I didn't want to sit at home alone watching bad Christmas movies and eating my weight in cookies. Figured I'd try to get a workout in, and maybe clear my head. Elliot nodded slowly, like he understood exactly where I was coming from. "Same here. Family's out of town, and I guess I didn't want to be totally by myself on Christmas. Thought a workout might help, or at least kill time." That hit me harder than I expected. Here we were, strangers, two guys who both chose the gym because it was better than feeling lonely in the middle of a holiday that's supposed to be about togetherness. It suddenly felt less random that we ended up stuck in this weird situation together. We found a couple of yoga mats near the corner, and I flopped down, stretching my legs out in front of me. Elliot did the same, and for a few minutes, neither of us said much. Just the quiet of two people sharing a space that was supposed to be filled with noise and movement. Finally, Elliot broke the silence. "So Mike, what's your story? Like, what do you do when you're not getting stranded in gyms with strangers?" I laughed softly, then shrugged. "Pretty boring, honestly. I work in publishing. Mostly copy editing. It's a desk job, so gym's my excuse to move around. What about you? He rolled onto his side, propping his head up on one hand, his phone flashlight casting shadows across his face. I'm a graphic designer. Freelance, mostly. So I kind of work odd hours and sometimes feel like I'm on my own all the time. That sounds rough during the holidays. Yeah, he said, voice quieter now, especially this year. My family's a bit complicated. They live across the country, and things have been tense. I nodded, feeling this unexpected wave of empathy. Christmas was supposed to be about joy, but for a lot of people, including me, it was messy and lonely and awkward. We sat like that for a while, sharing little bits about ourselves, about why we were both at the gym on Christmas Eve when probably no one else was. Somewhere between the conversation and the dim glow of our flashlights, it started to feel less like we were stuck and more like we'd found an unexpected connection. At one point, I caught him watching me, a subtle but unmistakable look curling at the edges of his mouth. "You're not like the usual guys here," he said, a little teasing. I raised an eyebrow. "What does that even mean?" he chuckled, a low sound that made my chest tighten. "I don't know. You seem more genuine. Not that I know many people here, but still." "Genuine, huh? I'll take it," I said, grinning. "You're not too bad yourself, graphic design mystery man." He laughed again, and suddenly the space between us felt smaller. The awkwardness started to melt into something warmer, something maybe a little hopeful. Then, just as I was about to say something dumb and probably embarrassing, I heard footsteps. The staff had arrived, flashlights cutting through the darkness as they moved toward us. Relief hit first. Finally, someone to unlock the doors and get this night back to normal. But then, as the lights flickered back on and the hum of the gym came roaring in, I realized I didn't want the night to end just yet. Elliot caught my gaze, that same easy smile spreading across his face. "Hey," he said softly, "maybe after all this, we could grab a coffee or something?" Not many people want to spend Christmas Eve in a gym, but I feel like this was kind of special. I felt my heart do a weird flip. For the first time in a long time, the idea of spending time with someone on Christmas Eve didn't feel awkward or sad. It felt right. "Yeah," I said, probably grinning too much. "I'd like that." As the doors finally swung open and we stepped outside into the cold night air, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected gym blackout was the best Christmas present either of us got that year. We stepped out into the cold night, the crisp air hitting my face like a splash of reality after the strange, almost surreal atmosphere inside the gym. The street was quiet, more so than I expected for Christmas Eve. A few cars passed lazily by, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Elliot pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders, but he didn't make any move to leave. Instead, he looked over at me, that easy smile still lingering. "So, about that coffee," he said, nudging me gently with his elbow. I laughed, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't been minutes before. "Yeah, I guess we should find a place that's open. I don't know about you, but my usual spots are probably closed by now." "Me too," he said. "There's a diner a couple blocks from here. I think they're open late, even on holidays." "Perfect. Lead the way, mystery graphic designer." We started walking. The sidewalks mostly empty save for the occasional family or couple bundled up against the cold, heading to wherever their Christmas Eve traditions took them. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all a little crazy. Two strangers stuck in a gym blackout, then wandering the streets for coffee on Christmas Eve. But honestly, I didn't want to think about that. I just wanted to see where this night would go. The diner was exactly what you'd expect. Neon signs flickering gently, red vinyl booths lining the windows, and the comforting smell of coffee and fried food wafting out as we stepped inside. The place was surprisingly busy, filled with a mix of night owls, holiday workers, and people like us who apparently didn't have anywhere else to be. We slid into a booth near the window and I watched as the waitress came over, a tired smile on her face. She seemed used to late-night Christmas crowds. "What can I get for you two tonight?" she asked. Elliot glanced at me first, then back at the waitress. "Coffee for both and maybe some pie?" I nodded. "Cherry, if they have it." Coming right up, she said, jotting it down. As she walked away, Elliot leaned back, eyes flicking over to me. You know, I never thought I'd meet someone this way. It's like something out of one of those cheesy holiday movies. I smiled, feeling a little warm inside despite the cold outside. Yeah, same here. I mean, who spends Christmas Eve at the gym and then gets stuck there in the dark with a stranger? Apparently us. We both laughed, and suddenly the awkwardness I'd felt earlier was replaced by this comfortable ease. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of easy, flowing conversation that you only get when you're unexpectedly connecting with someone. So, Elliot said, swirling his coffee, "What's your family like?" I hesitated, then shrugged. Complicated. They live a few states away, and we don't really do the big family Christmas thing anymore. It's quieter now. He nodded, his own expression softening. Mine's the same. Parents divorced, siblings scattered. Sometimes it feels like the holidays are just reminders of what's missing. I reached across the table, almost without thinking, and bumped his hand gently with mine. Well, you're not missing this conversation. His eyes met mine, and I could swear there was a flicker of something there. Hope, maybe, or something I hadn't felt in a long time. The pie arrived, and suddenly everything else faded a little. We dug in, trading bites and silly jokes about who got the bigger slice. The warmth of the diner, the buzz of other people around us, and the simple joy of sharing a moment made the night feel less lonely. After a while, Elliot leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a more serious tone. I'm glad we got stuck in the gym blackout. Weird as it sounds, it was kind of perfect. I felt my heart speed up, maybe because I was hoping this wasn't just a weird one-night thing. Me too. It's like the universe forced us into this moment. He smiled again, the way that smile reached his eyes, making my stomach do those ridiculous little flips. So what happens now? We just say Merry Christmas and go our separate ways? Maybe, I said, then quickly added, or maybe we see where this goes. He hesitated for a second, then pulled out his phone. Want to exchange numbers? I'd like to keep talking after tonight. I grinned and handed over my phone. Definitely. We typed in our info, the screen's glow illuminating our faces in the dim diner light. It felt like a promise, even if we didn't say it out loud. Outside, the night was still quiet, the Christmas lights reflecting softly on the snow-dusted sidewalks. I realized that this odd little adventure, the gym blackout, the late-night coffee, the unexpected connection, had turned a night I thought would be lonely into something I wouldn't forget. As we stepped back into the cold, I glanced over at Elliot, feeling something I hadn't in a long time, excitement for what was next. Maybe Christmas wasn't about family or traditions or perfect moments. Maybe it was about finding little sparks of connection when you least expect it, and if this was the start of something, well, I was ready to see where it went. We stepped back out into the cold night air, the diner's neon sign buzzing faintly behind us. I zipped up my jacket and stuffed my hands in my pockets, suddenly aware of how quiet the streets were. Nothing like the usual hustle and bustle you'd expect, even on Christmas Eve. It was like the city had taken a collective deep breath, and we were the only two people left awake in this little pocket of the world. Elliot glanced over at me, his breath fogging in front of his face. So what now? We just walk around until one of us gets cold enough to bail? I laughed. Sounds like a plan, unless you have a better idea. He shrugged, looking around like a kid checking out an empty playground. Honestly, I don't have much of a plan tonight. Coffee was the highlight so far. Same here. I guess it's just us in the city. We started walking, side by side, the snow crunching softly under our boots. The air was crisp and carried that unmistakable winter chill that makes you want to keep moving, keep warm. I found myself paying more attention to Elliot than to the streetlights, or the way the snowflakes drifted lazily down. He had this relaxed way about him, like he belonged in moments like this, even if he said he didn't have a plan. We passed a small park, the benches dusted in snow, and the bare trees outlined against the dark sky. The Christmas lights strung across the playground creaked softly in the breeze. Elliot stopped for a second and looked up at them. You ever think about how weird it is that we decorate trees and put lights on them? Like, what's the point other than making things feel cozy? I smiled at the randomness of the thought. Maybe it's exactly that. Making things cozy when it's cold and dark outside, like a small rebellion against the winter. Yeah, I like that, he said. A little rebellion. We kept walking, talking about everything and nothing. I told him about my dog, Max, who was probably snoozing by the fire back home and missing me terribly. He told me about his favorite childhood Christmas memory, a story involving a snowball fight that ended with him face first in a snowbank and his mom laughing so hard she cried. There was this easy rhythm to our conversation, a feeling that neither of us had to put on a front or pretend to be anything we weren't. After a while, we found ourselves standing outside a 24-hour bookstore that was still open, the glow from the windows spilling out onto the walkway. The inside smelled like old paper and coffee, a perfect kind of place to get lost for hours. Want to go in? Elliot asked. I nodded without hesitation. Yeah, let's do it. Inside, the warmth hit me like a wave. The low murmur of quiet customers, the soft jazz playing over the speakers, the shelves stacked high with books. It was like stepping into another world. We wandered between the aisles, occasionally picking up a book and showing it to the other, laughing at the weird titles or the cheesy covers. At one point, Elliot pulled out a worn copy of a poetry book and read me a few lines. His voice was soft but clear, and for a moment I forgot where we were or what time it was. It was just us, two guys in a bookstore on Christmas Eve, sharing something unexpectedly beautiful. I realized then how much I wanted to know more about him, about what made him laugh, what scared him, what he dreamed about. There was a quiet vulnerability in him that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could be that person he trusted to share it with. We finally settled in a little nook near the back, sitting on a bench surrounded by stacks of books. The hours slipped by as we talked about everything, the kind of deep stuff that usually takes weeks or months to come out. I told him about my struggles with feeling invisible sometimes, like I was just background noise in other people's lives. He shared how being freelance meant a lot of loneliness, of not really having a routine or a place to belong. I guess that's why tonight feels so different, he said quietly. Because for once, I'm not just talking to myself. I reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair out of his face. You're not alone, I said. Not anymore. There was a pause between us, charged and full of possibility. I could feel the heat of his gaze, and when he leaned in just a little, it was like the whole world shrank down to nothing but that moment. Before I could think too much about it, our lips met, soft, tentative, but full of everything neither of us had said out loud. It wasn't fireworks or fireworks-level drama, just two people finding comfort and something like hope in each other. Pulling back slowly, Elliot smiled shyly. Merry Christmas, Mike. Merry Christmas, Elliot. We stayed there a while longer, heads close together, letting the quiet of the bookstore wrap around us. Outside, the city continued to sleep, but inside that little bubble, something new was starting. Something real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe Christmas wasn't just about tradition or family or even where you were. Maybe it was about finding your person, even if it happened in the most unexpected place. On the coldest, quietest Christmas Eve. We stayed in that bookstore nook longer than either of us probably planned, but I wasn't in any hurry to break the magic. The kind of night where you lose track of time and just exist in that rare, perfect moment felt too few and far between, and I wanted to hold on to it. Eventually, though, the clock on the wall reminded us that time kept moving, even when you wanted it to stop. We reluctantly stood up, stretching out the kinks and looking around at the dwindling number of customers. The staff was closing up, casting tired glances our way as they tidied shelves and wiped counters. Guess we should get going before they kick us out, I said, half joking. Elliot laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah. As much as I love this place, I think the barista might have given us the please leave eyes. We stepped back outside, and the cold air hit us again like a splash. I zipped up my jacket tighter and pulled my scarf up a bit. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the snow-covered sidewalks. I realized I didn't want the night to end, not yet. But it also felt like the kind of moment where you have to decide if you're going to take a chance or just let it slip away. So I said, trying to sound casual but probably failing, "Do you have plans for tomorrow? Christmas Day?" Elliot shrugged, kicking at a patch of ice on the ground. Nothing solid. I might just sleep in and binge some shows. What about you? Same. No family around. No big plans. I was kind of dreading it, honestly. He looked at me then, eyes searching. Maybe we could change that. You know, do something together tomorrow? No pressure, just hang out. My heart jumped and I felt that familiar flutter I'd been trying to ignore. Yeah, I'd like that. We exchanged numbers properly this time, saving each other under Christmas Gym Buddy, which made us both laugh. It felt silly, but it was also kind of perfect, a little reminder of how strange and unexpected the night had been. As we walked toward the subway station, the conversation turned lighter. Talk of favorite movies, embarrassing stories, and the kind of jokes that only make sense to people who've spent hours talking in the middle of the night. I noticed how easy it was to be around him, how natural it felt to share space without the usual walls I'd built up around myself. When we reached the entrance to the subway, Elliot slowed down, his breath swirling in the cold air. I really mean it about tomorrow. I don't want this to be just a Christmas Eve thing. Me neither, I said, a little breathless. There was a pause, that charged kind of silence, where you're both waiting for one person to make the first move. Then Elliot reached out and took my hand. It was simple, but the warmth that spread through me was anything but. "See you tomorrow, Mike," he said softly. "Definitely." He disappeared down the stairs, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and a smile I couldn't wipe off if I tried. The next day I woke up later than usual, sunlight streaming through the blinds and a familiar buzz of excitement in my chest. I checked my phone and saw a message from Elliot. "See you at noon? Coffee and maybe some Christmas chaos?" I grinned and texted back, "Can't wait." Meeting him that afternoon felt like stepping into a new chapter. We wandered through the city's few open shops, shared a ridiculous amount of hot chocolate, and even braved a small Christmas market that was surprisingly lively despite the day. There was laughter, stolen glances, and quiet moments that made everything else fade away. At one point, as we stood watching a street musician playing a soft, jazzy rendition of Silent Night, Elliot leaned into me and whispered, "I'm really glad we got stuck in that blackout." "Me too," I said, tightening my arm around his waist. The night before had been unexpected, but the day after felt like the start of something real. I didn't know where this was going to lead. Hell, I didn't even know if it would last past New Year's. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just marking time. I was living it. And maybe that was the best kind of Christmas gift there is. After that Christmas day, things slipped into a rhythm neither of us expected, but both of us quietly hoped for. We started seeing each other more, not in some dramatic whirlwind romance way, but in that comfortable, real kind of way where you look forward to the next message, the next coffee date, the next late-night text that turns into a 2-hour phone call. One evening, a couple weeks after Christmas, we found ourselves back at the gym. Not because we were fitness fanatics, let's be honest, that wasn't really us, but because it was where we met. It felt important, like coming full circle. The gym was quieter than usual, the hum of the machines filling the space as we warmed up on the treadmills. I stole a glance at Elliot, who was focused on his elliptical, his face flushed from exertion. "You know," I said, trying to sound casual but failing a little, "I never thought I'd say this, but I kinda like coming here with you." He laughed, the kind of genuine, easy laugh that always made me feel like anything was possible. "Yeah? The place of our grand Christmas Eve adventure?" "Exactly. It's part of our story now." There was a beat of silence, and then he slowed down his pace and turned to me with a serious look in his eyes. "Mike, can I be honest with you?" "Always," I said, matching his tone. I've never really done this before. Like, been with someone and felt like it could actually be something more. I was scared, you know? That night in the gym, it felt like a fluke. Like, maybe it was just loneliness talking. I nodded, heart pounding. "I get that. I felt the same way. But then you showed up again. And suddenly, it didn't feel so random." He smiled, that shy, hopeful smile that made me want to reach out and never let go. "I don't want to be alone anymore, Mike. Not just on holidays or random blackout nights. I want us." I swallowed hard, words catching in my throat. "I want that too, Elliot. More than I thought possible." We slowed our machines to a stop and stood there in the middle of the gym, surrounded by the usual clatter and buzz. But in that moment, everything else faded away. After that night, our lives started intertwining in ways neither of us saw coming. We met each other's friends, awkwardly at first, but with more ease each time. I met his cat, Jasper, who was suspicious of me for exactly 5 minutes before deciding I was okay. Elliot came to a family dinner with me, my small, somewhat dysfunctional crew, and somehow fit right in, like he'd been part of it all along. There were tough days too, moments when old fears popped up, when the past crept in and threatened to pull us apart. But each time, we talked. We didn't always get it right, but we tried. And that made all the difference. One chilly spring night, as we sat on the fire escape outside my apartment, wrapped in blankets and watching the city lights twinkle below, Elliot turned to me and said, "Remember that Christmas Eve, when the gym went dark and I thought I'd be stuck with some stranger for hours?" I laughed, leaning into his shoulder. "Yeah, I remember. Best blackout ever." He smiled, fingers tracing circles on my arm. "I think that night saved me, saved us. I don't know what I'd be doing if I hadn't met you." I felt a lump in my throat, overwhelmed by how far we'd come. Me neither, but I'm glad we did. We kissed softly then, the kind of kiss that wasn't about fireworks or grand declarations, but about connection, steady, real, and full of promise. Looking back, it's wild to think that a random power outage in a nearly empty gym on Christmas Eve could lead to all this. But maybe that's life. Messy, unpredictable, and sometimes, just sometimes, it throws you exactly what you need when you least expect it. And I guess I'll always be grateful for that blackout, for that night, and for the guy who made it all feel like the start of something worth holding on to. The months after that spring night blurred together in the best way. Ordinary and extraordinary all at once. We settled into a groove that felt like home, the kind of comfort that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Elliot and I weren't perfect, and our story wasn't some fairy tale, but it was ours, real, messy, and full of quiet moments that mattered. One chilly evening, as autumn began to curl its way into the city, we found ourselves back at that same gym. The place had changed a bit. New equipment, fresh paint, but it still held that weird magic for us. We were stretching near the weights when Elliot caught my eye, that familiar soft smile tugging at his lips. "Remember when we got locked in here on Christmas Eve?" he asked. I laughed, shaking my head. How could I forget? It's kind of our origin story now. He reached out, fingers brushing mine. Casual, but deliberate. "I've been thinking about how lucky we are, not just to have found each other, but for that ridiculous blackout that forced us together." I squeezed his hand, feeling the steady warmth that had become my anchor. "Yeah, it's funny how sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things." He nodded, eyes serious now. "And I don't want to take this for granted. I want us to keep building something real, even when it's hard." I smiled, heart full. Me too. No matter what. Standing there, in a place that once felt like just a random gym, I realized how much had changed. The loneliness that once weighed on me had lifted, replaced by something steady and true. That night, as we walked out into the crisp evening, I felt a quiet kind of joy, the kind that comes from knowing you found someone who sees you, even in the dark. And maybe that's what really matters. Not the perfect moments, but the ones where you choose to stay, to trust, to love anyway. Because sometimes, the best beginnings come from the most unexpected places. And I'm grateful every day that ours started in a blackout in a quiet gym on Christmas Eve with just two guys who decided to take a chance.